Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. A warm welcome to this important session addressing connecting green recovery and resilience in cities with the ReCAP21 project in the spotlight. Today is the 9th of November. We're midway through the COP, well, actually moving towards the end of the COP. And the topic of green recovery, I've not heard so much yet. So this is really an important topic that we will be addressing here. And we have a wonderful lineup of speakers and panelists for you. So maybe without much ado, just framing, what are we going to really zoom in on today? So as you know, around the world, our cities and local governments are facing a global pandemic with their citizens and businesses against the backdrop of many shocks and stresses and emerging vulnerabilities, which we now need to tackle all at the same time. And the challenge is to bring equity, to bring economy and climate action also to the center of these recovery approaches. We'll be exploring this topic, and we will be illustrating what the ReCAP project has been doing in this space. So I'm not going to give away much more, and maybe first I would like to briefly introduce my speakers. If we can move to the next slide and zoom in. So we have, we're really delighted to have Ruben Verschan with us. He's the Senior Policy Officer for Sustainable Urban Development at the BMZ, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Our keynote will be given by Dr. Nazma Hook, who's the Head of Resilient Development at Eclipse. And then we would have a wonderful panel discussing what is happening in Rwanda, Bangladesh, and generally. So we have Samia Chaturvedula, the Deputy Director of Eclipse South Asia Secretariat based in Delhi. We have Dana Omran, the Global Director of Strategy and Operations of the Resilient Cities Network. And last but certainly not least, we have Felix Döhler from the GIZ, the Head of Urban Development. Now, we would actually like to know who you are as well in our audience. So both our colleagues at the COP in the Blue Zone, in the Pavilion of Cities and Regions, but also for those joining us online. So we would like to launch a quick survey, if we may. And the survey, just if you could click on the slido.com, and you can either let us know which entity you represent. Are you with a local or regional government? Are you from a national government, private sector, academia and research, or another? So we are super keen to hear from you. It's pretty much 50-50 now between local, no, more coming in, wonderful. It's good to see we've got a mix in our group of people joining. Wonderful. So excellent to hear. This is also interesting because the topic touches on all those actors that we've listed in this group. So thank you very much. The NGOs are the bulk, and then we have local, regional governments, national governments, private sector, and academia roughly equally represented. Thank you so much. Good to see who is in our panel, sorry, in our room today. Now, without much ado, I would like to hand the floor to our BMZ colleague to also just set the scene. The topic is an important topic also for the German government, and it would be lovely to hear from you, Ruben. How do you frame this? Where do you see things going also in the space of green recovery and climate action? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mareike. It's good to be here. Thanks for organizing this very important event on this timely topic. And good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening to each and every one of you out there, depending on where you're joining us from. In the past 1.5 years, it has been quite a journey, as you all know. COVID-19 has affected cities and international institutions alike around the world in an unprecedented way. Particularly, city governments and city dwellers have faced significant challenges. City governments, for example, had to shift their attention to short-term pandemic management and restrict economic and physical mobility, often leading to losses of jobs, particularly in the informal sector. Further, local governments were confronted with strained municipal budgets as social spending rose while revenues fell, leading to further increased debt and reduced fiscal space to provide basic services for citizens and implement, sometimes even already planned, measures to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. In this context, the pandemic has, of course, also impacted international development cooperation. We had to swiftly react to this new reality and the challenges it poses. Resources had to be redirected and ways of cooperating with very limited physical contact had to be established. This has meant many open questions, new experiences in the cities, and new thinking in the projects. But one has to emphasize also the opportunities. Fairly early on, we started to make the case for a double dividend approach. Investments in sustainable urban infrastructure offer a unique opportunity by combining economic stimulus packages with needed climate resilient, transformative structural reforms, leading to market and non-market benefits. To put it more clearly, green recovery can be an opportunity to change the way of decision-making. Does a project contribute to climate mitigation or adaptation? Does a project have a positive effect on socio-economic development? If these questions are internalized in municipal development plans and followed by sufficient investment, we can substantially change the way of decision-making towards a truly transformational approach of sustainable urban development. We see cities as key actors. As most of the SDGs can only be achieved in and with cities, this is why we try to strengthen the role of cities in decision-making processes and why we want to enable them to take and implement bold and innovative decisions for a sustainable future. Against this backdrop, in 2020 and 2021, BMZ has released 4.7 billion euros to a Corona emergency program for developing and emerging countries to mitigate the direct consequences as well as the socioeconomic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. 3 projects have received funds from the program to help specifically cities develop first solutions to these challenges and to support sustainable transformation. One of these projects is the sector program Cities, which we commissioned to implement the Resilient Cities Action Package, or short ReCAP21, which is at the spotlight today, as Mareike said in the introduction. For the implementation of ReCAP21, we brought GIZ, ECLI, Resilient Cities, and the City Alliance together to combine their individual strengths and knowledge and to disseminate the lessons learned from ReCAP21 through their respective networks. In this way, it is quite an innovative approach for us. Green recovery and, if we go a step further, building up resilience in cities are obviously complex issues. And I'm looking forward to the presentation of first ReCAP21 results, as well as to a fruitful discussion about green recovery and resilience in cities with our partners today. The pandemic has opened up a window of opportunity for taking a path into a new direction. Green recovery packages can support cities to react directly to the needs caused by the pandemic, help cities boost their economies while improving equity, and help cities to prepare communities for future climate and health risks. Whether we call it Recover Forward or Green and Just Recovery or Resilient Recovery, we need to advance this discussion and create a joint approach to bring the attention to the fact that recovery in cities will have to happen in a socially and environmentally just and green manner. With that, I would like to thank you. I'm very much looking forward to the exchange with you today, and back to you, Mareike.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ruben. I think what you shared is so critical, and I'd like to zoom in on 2 words. Partnership and transformation is what we really need, in addition to everything else you said. But this is where we will now, in the keynote presentation of Nazmo, we'll zoom in a little bit on those particular aspects. And from my side, I just really wish to thank the BMZ for really zooming in on this topic of green recovery and resilience. These are topics that desperately need much more finance, and we know the Germans are a very generous donor, and hope many more will step into this space to make sure that we can deal with pandemics in the future and other crises in a much more efficient manner. So Nazmo, over to you, and maybe I can quickly introduce the partners of the ReCAP project. So we have implemented by the GIZ on behalf of the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. We've got 4 partners, so ICLAI, with 3 ICLAI offices engaged. We have the Resilient Cities Network, we have Cities Alliance, as well as the GIZ in Mauritania. And this partnership, in my view, has been super wonderful to try and connect our work and our work streams together as well. And Nazmal will be sharing some perspectives on that. So the floor is yours, Nazmal.
Thank you, Mareike, and good morning and good afternoon. And also thank you, Ruben, for the very nice introduction and setting the scene, where I would like to build on your approach, how BMZ is going to undertake an integrated action for green and resilient recovery, having climate action and all other integrated necessary actions in place. So ReCAP21, as already Mareike and Ruben, you have already mentioned, a very unique space of partnership where not only we, the city networks, we are coming together to promote an integrated actions for green and resilient recovery, but also we have gathered several other stakeholders, including the city experts, including the donors, as well as an inclusive learning space where we also gathered the city government and city stakeholders. So let me just briefly show you what is, in a nutshell, what is the Resilient Cities Action Package 2021 or ReCAP21. It's a very action-packed program, starting from knowledge sharing to enabling cities for developing finance or mobilizing finance for implementing some of the green and resilient actions. But if we look at the chronologically, how does it look like? So the basic objective or the main objective of the program is increasing the capacity of selected cities in Asia and in Africa for combating pandemics, COVID-19, and the cities includes, I will in a moment, I will show which cities we have covered under the project, and then identify priority urban green and resilient recovery action packages and activities cross-sectorally. Thirdly, the project also addresses or also highlights the development of planning for the implementation of small scale measures at city scale. Fourthly, the project also develops and upgrades long-term resilience plans, which are very often built on the previous action plans, resilience and adaptation plans, which are already in place in many cities. And finally, the project also generates and upgrades a global knowledge exchange on resilient urban recovery. So, as I said, the project has been implementing in 4-5 cities in global South, especially in the 3 countries in South Asia. In Bangladesh, 2 city corporations, Rajshahi and Narayanganj. In Rwanda, it's 2 cities, Muhanga and Kigali. And in Mauritania, it's Segba neighborhood in its capital city. So these 5 cities are under coverage of ReCAP21 projects. So as I said already, the project is very action-packed, very jam-packed program, and we have a very limited time frame actually. So the project has been started in April 2021 and going to be concluded actually in November this year 2021. So within a very short span of time, we felt that we have come across quite a lot of way, including a very dense set of actions, which includes, among other, knowledge generation and sharing, training of green and resilient development for the local government and city officials, then supporting local government to undertake green recovery and climate resilience projects. Finally, fourthly, also assisting cities to prepare, develop, and upgrade their climate action planning, and which finally ended up in enabling finance for green and resilient recovery and activities and actions and projects for the cities. So how does each of the activities or set of activities look like? Let me have briefly touch upon some of the actions that we have accomplished or are currently being processing to be accomplished. Firstly, the knowledge generation and sharing. The whole ReCAP project is basically based on cross-sectoral and cross-organizational knowledge generation and knowledge sharing. Firstly, the project at the very beginning, together with our cities, and ICLI and our cities, we have provided the underlying guidance and principles how a resilient recovery look like. And it has been published in the GIZ promoted Urbanet blogs, Urbanet website, which is still available there. And as the follow-up action, by end of this month, the project is also going to publish a recap knowledge product, which will highlight all the best practices that we have conducted in the cities, all the lesson learned that we can share with the global audience, so that other cities, similar cities, and the stakeholders also can learn from the experiences that we have gathered from the project. So I invite all of you to have a keen eye on our website. The knowledge product is coming, and I hope you will enjoy the product. So as I said, as part of the knowledge product, we have quite a big frequent exchange between the organizations, participating organizations, for example, ICLI, GIZ, our cities, and another partner. What is our offer to each other? So these offers, actually, you see there are two frameworks here. One is resilient recovery framework from our cities, and second one is City Works, a toolbox to implement global agendas in cities, basically owned by GIZ. So these frameworks are basically the guides us how we should underpin the resilience recovery or green recovery activities at the local level. What should be the founding principle? How we can maintain the balance between different sectors without compromising the very basic fundamental needs of economy, very basic fundamental needs of lives and livelihoods, but at the same time we can continue our upward journey towards resilient recovery and green recovery. So at the left hand side, the resilient recovery framework from our city guides us what should be the actions at local level, what should be the principles at local level, and the City Works toolbox from the GIZ also guides us how the local level actions should be translated into a global policy making agenda, and how it should guide us to implement actions which are very much in line with the very important global agreements like sustainable development goals and new urban agenda, etc. But as another supporting tool is ICLI's Green Climate Cities program, which is global climate impact program promoted by ICLI, by us, and it also has a different lenses such as green recovery. And the tool basically helps cities, help stakeholders to understand where we are in terms of our capacities, our needs, what is necessary for going to the next stage, and then what kind of actions should we take, and how the action should be accelerated across region, across stakeholders, and also across policies. So this process guidance, which is promoted by ICLI, is also very much in tune with the two other frameworks or other frameworks that I have shown the slide before, and works very seamlessly to guide the whole process of resilient recovery for the cities. The second set of action includes training on green recovery and resilient development. So these action under the training, we have provided two trainings, one training in Bangladesh and one training in Rwanda, which is basically conducted in October and November 2021. And the trainings includes the city planners, city officials, local government officials, engineers, political leaderships, and other city officials. So the whole purpose of the training is to provide an integrated view, integrated approach of resilient recovery to the local government people from the major thematic areas of climate risk and vulnerability assessment, understanding resilient recovery, connecting climate action and resilient recovery, and financing resilient recovery. But we should also keep in mind that this training, although it looks like a training, was not a one-way flow. We, as the city network, city expert, we have also learned quite a lot during the training sessions with the city officials and city stakeholders, which we also have reflected on our own program, and which subsequently informed the subsequent actions under ReCAP21. And the trainings are conducted by the art cities and ICLI jointly in both countries. Thirdly, as I said, the training programs was a very good opportunity with the city stakeholders for mutual and inclusive learning. which helped us to provide supporting city governments to design and implement green recovery and climate resilience projects. So from the ReCAP project, within very short period of time, we supported city government to undertake different projects which would be very much useful for green and resilient recovery. Although these are very small scale, but we believe that a small project can start making a difference, and these little steps are very important motivating space for the smaller cities, for the secondary cities, which are often remain out of sight, but they are also very much economically important areas, economically important cities for many countries of the world, like Bangladesh. In Rajshahi city, the project helped to develop operating and maintaining 4 solar power water vending machines and sensor-based hand washing station for low-income and climate vulnerable population of Rajshahi city in Bangladesh. At the same time, the project helped to upgrade sustainable business models for 2 climate resilient recovery projects in Bangladesh prepared under Urban Let's project, which is another project. So it shows how chronologically we are building on each other. So which is also a very much sustainable approach that we like to promote instead of every time initiating from the scratching. In Rwanda, the project also helped to supply and install 70 solar photovoltaic systems and LED street lights for 6 healthcare centers in Kigali as a way forward for green and resilient recovery. So this is number 4. This is another action that we should underline, one of the very important actions we consider under the project, which is not very much visible, but very important stepping stone. For why? Because we coordinated a climate action planning in Rwanda through national and local dialogue. So under these dialogue, we mobilized all level of governance in Rwanda, including city government, municipal government, neighborhood level governance, plus national government. All level of governance we mobilized, coming together, discussed openly what is the challenge, what do we have currently, where should we like to go, or what would we like to achieve in terms of climate action and to make us resilient. So through this very interactive space, interactive enabling space that we provided to the cities, we have gathered so many number of results and suggestions which are very much important stones for cities and national government to achieve their ambitious climate objectives and goals. It is basically underlined that everybody agreed during the dialogue that fostering multi-level governance, meaning that all level of governance is coming together. Interaction between the subnational and national government should be better aligned with the projects or other way around to meet the national targets of climate goals. So that is a space that we always focus to enable that cities, all the level of governance should come together to see how we can align our objectives and how all the projects and the donor monies and the projects are coming together should go fit into one direction that will obviously meet the climate actions and targets. And we are very happy that this dialogue took place in Rwanda, and another dialogue is going to take place in Bangladesh by end of this month. And final action that we are proudly say that we have promoted through the project is financing green recovery and climate resilience. So as I said, transformative adaptation action plan, action program, which is abbreviated as STEP, is one of the programs that promotes a project pipeline for the cities. So through this project pipeline, ICLI in GIZ is also part and partner of this STEP, along with many other city networks and other organizations like C40 and others. We encouraged cities to come up with their project ideas so that we can make it more bankable. We can provide on the ground support, hands-on support to the cities so that this project could be funded through different donors and could be implemented. So under this project, ReCAP project, 4 project has already been very actively supported and for the local governments. And in Rwanda, we see already 2 projects. 2 project proposals are being submitted under the ReCAP21. One is retrofitting healthcare centers in Muhanga, and second one is tree planting in Muhanga. And in Bangladesh also, 2 projects has been submitted to TAF financing. One is rainwater harvesting, and second one is installation of rooftop solar photovoltaic system. So in a nutshell, the project in overall last 6 months has come across quite a path, which includes knowledge sharing, and finally, as I said, ending up encouraging cities to come up with innovative ideas for green and resilient recoveries and helping them to make their project ideas bankable. And we have already provided that support to the cities, and we like to continue with them. So what lessons we have learned? Fine, the first lesson, and which is the most important one, that technical assistance of city networks, technical experts and development can, we demonstrated through that project, can effectively be coordinated and integrated. Secondly, combining green recovery and climate action that supports implementing SDGs at city scale and local government level. Integrated and inclusive planning through multi-stakeholder partnership is one of the vital instruments for making the project success and the ambition success. Fourthly, importance of multi-level governance and coordinated actions. And finally, value of knowledge brokerage and building upon on the local knowledge or the local expertise what we have in every cities, every local government space, and we need to provide them adequate values and recognition. So with that, I like to conclude here, and if anyone willing to learn more about the project, please contact us through carbon@ecli.org, and I wish you a very nice afternoon. Over to you, Marike.
Thank you so much, Nazmul. Thanks for that snapshot. And there's a lot of work going behind that snapshot, I have to tell you that. So we would like to understand, maybe also from you as participants, if you would like to share with us through a word cloud, what ideas do you think should be part of this green and resilient recovery space? So we would be very curious to hear from you, and maybe just share 1 or 2 words on the crucial issues that you feel should be part of green recovery using the Slido and the hashtag. I actually would also participate here from my side. Let's put in COP26. And so anything you wish to share. We're also, this is a multidisciplinary space as well. So it would be interesting to understand really the different perspectives that we've got. Okay, equity comes in, equitable principles. Indeed, this just transition, I think, is a hot topic at the current COP, and certainly we need to make sure that there's an inclusive approach. Local culture, absolutely wonderful. So curious to see more words. Great, participation, innovation, social justice, excellent. Any thinking around money, economy? What do you think in terms of what makes this green? The green piece is an interesting word. We use green for so many things, for trees and foliage, but also for the abstract terminology of sustainable. Wonderful, thank you so much. Okay, keep them coming. We'd love to look at what we have in the end. Nature-based solutions and important peace systems change, local jobs. Absolutely. Thank you so much, people. This is very helpful. It touches, if you look at that list, it touches on everything that we're addressing at the COP and everything that should be implemented after the COP if we have not yet started. So green jobs, the future is there for us, most certainly. Now we go to our panel, and we have, if you would notice also in the whole program, we have perfect gender parity. We have 3 ladies and 3 gentlemen. And without much ado, I would like to zoom in on our colleague from Asia. Soumya is the leader, the team leader also for the work we're doing in Bangladesh. And she has a lot of experience with the Bangladeshi context, although of course she's based in India and has been working for many, many years in the space of climate action. And her expertise and leadership has really helped us strengthen the rollout of the support we can do to local governments in the South Asian region. Soumya, a warm welcome to you. And it would be wonderful to hear what experiences and lessons learned would you like to share with us specifically now from the Bangladeshi context. Have you seen interesting evidence of how the green recovery is really being embedded in local development plans or climate plans? Any good suggestions you have also for other countries?
Thank you. That's a very loaded question for local government, I think, especially at this time. Yeah, the two local authorities that we work with, Narayanganj and Rajshahi in Bangladesh, at the time of the pandemic were just beginning to think about their climate action plan. And that is when the pandemic played out. And so, yeah, we had seen a multitude of factors at that point. So while there was initially, when they started off in the climate action planning process, there was significant interest, stakeholders got together, all of that. Then we had the pandemic come in, and then there was this extreme need to focus on healthcare, to focus on enabling livelihoods, focus on food delivery mechanisms, focusing on these varied aspects of ensuring basic service provision to citizens. And the provision of basic services to citizens, when they were discussing the climate action plan, was not really embedded in the climate action plan during the initial discussions. But post the pandemic, when we were then working with the city in identifying what their priorities are, we had seen a significant shift in what the focus was. So initially, when we're looking at climate action planning, it was more, let's build more storm drains. I'm seeing, flooding, so that's my priority. But later on, when we were looking at the prioritization, healthcare facilities, looking at local labor market and how can employment be embedded into the climate action plan. So these social, so-called, previously, because they were not in the priority list, so these social issues kind of took priority post the pandemic when they were developing the climate action plan. Air pollution, something that came out of this entire COVID story, was to significantly look at air pollution, especially one of the cities, Narayanganj, is an industrial city just outside Dhaka. And so the impact of air pollution on health, and did it exacerbate the impact of the pandemic? So there was a lot of conversation locally that was happening around this. So the focus on air pollution control came up quite significantly. So yes, I think there were a lot of lessons that were learned, and a lot more aspects that we saw that the city wanted to tackle in the climate action plan itself. And so, through that focus on the green recovery part, even the pilot implementation that they were undertaking, the list of projects that they had initially, but ultimately ended up looking at, clean power for healthcare facilities, looking at access to public service and sustainable power for public services, be it community centers, be it libraries, things like that. Looking at air pollution sensors, because there was absolutely no measurement of what the situation was like. So looking at air pollution measurement. So these were the kind of projects that came up during the pandemic, and post the pandemic, all of this got implemented. So yeah, I think that there has been a significant shift in the way they're looking at it. And the other point was a lot of the government schemes. So people never related them to resilience, never related them to improving, the resilience of vulnerable communities. This wasn't thought of in that sense when they had all this national government fund that was rolling in. But post the pandemic, this is something that was significantly done, where they were looking at every government policy or every government financing mechanism and how they could link it to to improving access and livelihood of local populations. So yeah, these were a few lessons that came out. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see that in a way we've brought another new lens to this whole space of climate action, and yeah, trying to connect the dots, I think, is also an important piece, and it's good to understand that the governments are really digging into this topic. Maybe also now moving to Dana Omran, the Global Director for Strategy and Operations for Resilient Cities Network, one of our partners. We're very happy to have you with us, Dana, this morning. And I think it's very early your morning still, but apologies for that. In terms of the specific approaches for green recovery, that Resilient Cities Network is supporting and mobilizing specifically to guide cities and local governments in times of uncertainty like we're facing now in the pandemic. How can multi-stakeholder partnerships really be instrumental in accelerating this important space of sort of bringing resilience and green recovery together?
Thank you, Marika. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be joining you all from New York. You know, when we look back at the last 2 years, what this pandemic has laid bare is how deeply unequal our cities are and how important it is to develop new approaches, innovative interventions to building the resilience of the most vulnerable communities and the urban poor, who are frankly the most hard hit when the pandemic struck. A year and a half ago, our cities, you know, who were all really on the front lines of dealing with this pandemic, started asking each other and asking us, what does it mean to incorporate resilience? You know, all of these resilience frameworks, these resilience tools that we've been talking about for years, as we think about recovery. And so over the last year and a half, we've been doing a lot of work with our cities to really understand how they are incorporating these resilience principles into their long-term recovery planning. And one of the things that we have been advocating for, and this ReCAP21 program has really given us an opportunity to do, is try out new approaches that are not just the traditional recovery approaches that only seek to resume economic growth, for example, but basically use this crisis as an opportunity to develop an approach to recovery that enables equitable, climate-friendly, and resilient local economic development. You know, those 3 North Stars that we have been pursuing throughout this program and throughout much of our work as city networks. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of pieces that Nazmul mentioned in his presentation, is that we developed a resilient recovery framework. That one of the things that this framework does, I think, that is a little bit different, is that it really puts at its heart and soul equity, the issue of how do you empower multiple stakeholders through recovery planning processes? How are you engaging? How do you include, how do you develop more inclusive approaches? The second idea of this framework is thinking about how do you leverage data and technology to better understand your risks? How are you thinking about complex urban systems and how those systems interact? Because as we know, you know, the pandemic was a health crisis, but it was an economic crisis, it was a food systems crisis, it was a climate crisis, it was a lot of different crises wrapped up into one. And so you know, there's no better case study for how a systems approach is so important for actually developing long-term recovery interventions. And then finally, this issue of a green recovery. And, you know, as we've been talking to cities, we've been trying to untangle that. And it's something that, you know, we've valued very much our partnership with ICLEI, learning more about how we can incorporate some of ICLEI's frameworks and tools, and thinking about around nature-based solutions, circularity, low emissions development, for example, to help guide cities towards a different approach to long-term recovery planning. When I think about what, you know, how we as a group of urban practitioners and a global community can really drive investment towards these new approaches, I think that we need to really focus on driving investment towards projects that provide multiple benefits. It's no longer enough to just to have a climate project or to have a jobs program. We really need to think about those intersection and where we can create those multiple benefits in everything that we're doing. And we as a global community need to work together, because many of us are going into some of these very small cities and trying to, and sometimes cities, I think, are feeling bombarded by all of the donor support or the external support. And so I think having a coordinated approach, as we have had in this ReCAP21 program, has been an incredible opportunity, because it allows us to really come together to a common understanding and develop basically a shared understanding of resilience, creating a space of reflection and learning and innovation, and and I think that enhances our capacity to really, assist and really see change on the ground. And I think that as partners and funders, we really have to continue to do our part to support cities, so that in every infrastructure decision that they're making, in every policy decision that they're making as a result of this crisis, that they are thinking about climate, that they are thinking about climate and equity, and that they are thinking about creating jobs. And it's been a real pleasure to have this, to be part of this program over the last few months. And I think that it's taught us a lot about how we can all work better together to bring the best to the cities. So thanks, Marika. Over back to you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dana. And this is a wonderful segue. Also now handing over to Felix Döhler from the GIZ. Also, Felix, I think the ReCAP projects and the work we've done with all the interesting partners connecting the dots in a way. What do you see in terms of also how we complement each other, and what do you see as the opportunities for the future to scale up? And maybe you could zoom in a little bit on what GIZ role here was as well. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Marike, for this opportunity. And I see the diversity of approaches that we have as 4 organizations is one of our biggest assets, actually. You know, when we first thought of the ReCAP21 program, the objective is to enable selected cities to implement plans and measures for resilient recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. So, but when the epidemic struck, I think it's safe to say no one of us knew exactly how to handle this at the city level. Now, our role as a sector program cities advising BMZ at the global level is to mainstream sustainable urban development approaches and provide related tools and approaches. But we don't implement on the ground. So on the methodological side, we from the sector program cities provide an approach to implement global agendas locally with our toolbox CityWorks. It provides a step-by-step approach to analyze on how a city can better address potentials and shortcomings when it comes to implementing the Agenda 2030 and SDG targets. So we provide this toolkit publicly through our website and have assisted a number of bilateral programs of GIZ in its implementation strictly on a demand basis. But in the COVID context, when BMZ provided special COVID funds to help partners around the world, we needed a specific and actionable approach for resilient recovery on the ground and suitable implementation partners very quickly to be implemented in this year. So to achieve this, we and our partners combine the efforts, our expertise and resources. First, the Eclipse Green Climate Cities methodology and its vast network of regional municipal partners was of great importance to us. Its cross-regional urban program, Urban Let's, and also its financing vehicle, the TAP pipeline. Then we have our cities with its long-standing experience and network of more than 100 city resilience officers. Then more recently, its webinar series, Cities at the Frontline, and its Resilient Cities framework and in its toolkit for resilient recovery that was developed as a response to the pandemic. And then last but not least, we have Cities Alliance as a global knowledge partner. Cities Alliance complements the other 2 partnerships with its global multi-stakeholder network and its knowledge on resilience, informality, and the urban poor. In implementation, our role as GIZ is to assure that these approaches are blended together well in the ReCAP21 methodology, as outlined already in Nasmu's presentation and alluded to by Sumya and Dana. Now, and our specific lens is to see to it that the actions conceived and carried out are aligned with the multiple development dimensions of the Agenda 2030, but also the Sendai framework, of course, and to assure that everything is documented well. And to do that, we are putting our lessons learned online as tools, and we may even develop specific tools coming out of our experiences, planning exercises in ReCAP21, put them up as an integral part of the CityWorks tool set. Yeah, I can only state, to sum it up, it's been a great learning experience to see how different partners come in with different angles, viewpoints, emphasis, and to try and combine our methodological approaches. And I hope it's the same degree of learning experience for the other organizations involved. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Felix, for sharing your perspectives, and also for wearing the hat for Cities Alliance, because indeed they are not with us today. Definitely in spirit and thought they are. For me, it was quite interesting in a way. What each of you as panelists have shared is it touches very much on. It sounds very much we have a logical partnership. We also need a feedback loop back from the local governments back to us. So I think in this complex space that we're now facing with a pandemic, which has indeed had repercussions way beyond being a health pandemic, we need to better understand, I think, also the perspectives of the local governments and where they have their own gaps. So there are knowledge gaps, there are data gaps, there are staff capacity gaps, there are finance gaps. And we see exactly the same gaps if you look at it from a climate perspective. So I think in this project, I hope we will also learn a bit more from the selected local governments that are getting the support, what they really need when we're considering now a future pandemic or future crisis. We know this is not the last one we'll be facing, and then how to really embed that all in the sustainable development plans, because in the end, this is what we wish to progress on. I would like to check whether there are any questions. I'm not sure if our audience in the pavilion have any questions. So just checking in with the colleagues who are at the COP, if they can answer. And it looks as if we do not have questions from the audience yet. So then I would like to go into our next round of conversation. And just opening the floor, I'm not sure, Patricia, if it's possible to put a spotlight on all the panelists at the same time, but if not, I would maybe then start with Dana this time, maybe considering future cooperation. What would you see from what we've learned so far in this wonderful endeavor? What would you see as next steps that we could consider for cooperation on green and resilient recovery? Are there specific priorities for the Resilient Cities Network?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are two big priorities when I reflect on what we've learned through this program and through much of the other work that we're doing. I think the first is around data, and it's around understanding really the complexity of the cities and who your vulnerable are. I'll give you an example from Kigali, which is a city that is a part of this program and is a city that we've been working very deeply with for over the last 5 years. When the pandemic hit and many lockdowns ensued in the city of Kigali, there was a big issue and a big crisis of food, and how informal workers, people living in informal settlements, poor and vulnerable communities could access food under very strict lockdown measures. And the city did an admirable job of marshaling up all of its available resources to get the basic foods to these vulnerable communities as quickly as possible. And our chief resilience officer was one of the people who was leading in this effort. And it was truly a heroic effort to do this in the time of crisis. But what the city learned about itself due to this experience is that they didn't really know. They vaguely know where these communities are. They know where the households are, but they didn't really have access to dashboards and live data, and they weren't able to overlay this data with other types of data that was critical, including the health data, etc. And so one of the things that they realized that made them very vulnerable and that they're really focused on as they think about long-term recovery and how they respond to the next crisis is how do they build up that data capacity and that ability to really truly understand their city and to understand they're vulnerable. And we've seen one of the great things about being in a part of a city network. We've seen cities from across our network who have indeed developed these really sophisticated ways of understanding, using data, leveraging data and technology to understand their vulnerable communities and to get them better access to care in times of crisis. And so there's a real opportunity for cities like Kigali to learn from other cities, but as a group of funders, as a group of partners, we need to think about how do we drive investment towards helping these cities build that type of data and that type of capacity. The second priority, I think, is around project preparation and funding. You know, many of these cities understood and know, and again, when I look at the city of Kigali and many of the other cities I work with in Africa, there's a lot of great ideas. There's a lot of planning that has been done over the years, but then you get to the next step of how do you actually prepare a project? How do you actually make a project bankable? And then, you know, things fall short. And I think you're nodding your head, and I think this is experiences we've all seen in doing work with cities. And so we must drive funding towards better project preparation capacity. We must help cities develop that in-house capacity to really turn ideas into action and into bankable projects. And I think that's the next frontier. I think we have spent the last decade really talking about this is what resilience is, this is what sustainability is. These are shared and common principles. But now is the time to really put the money behind it and really start to drive our focus and attention towards enabling cities to better access finance and funding. And so I think those two priorities, better enabling, equipping cities to use data and technology to understand who their most poor and vulnerable are, so they could really truly pursue equitable and inclusive approaches, as well as investment in project preparation and funding, I think are key in this next era of resilient and green recovery. Thanks, Marika. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Dana. Indeed, I think those are crucial aspects. Maybe Felix, from your perspective, is there anything else you wanted to reflect specifically from the GIZ or potentially the German perspective? Where do you see the priorities for the future, and how can we make sure that we can better serve these local governments and cities to protect, especially also the vulnerable and the poor, because they are not yet at heart and center of many plans? Any suggestions there from your perspective? You're muted, Felix.
I would also maybe want to respond in terms of like our next steps in what is at the heart of our approach. As I said in the beginning, as a sector project that operates globally, our main function is on knowledge generation capacity. And from this perspective, I would like to make 3 points at a practical level. Firstly, and foremostly, we want to support our partners in conceiving and implementing green and resilient approaches to green recovery. Partners in the municipalities that have been supported in the ReCAP21 program, which has had a very short implementation time frame. And therefore, I hope that the municipal partners that have shown such great commitment will continue and scale up the approaches that have started, but also that our partners in the narrow sense and wider sense can continue supporting these processes in the framework of their partnerships. Then concerning the tools and the documentation, we will aim to put up the most useful tools, as I said, and hope that many municipalities in the global south will benefit from the targeted green recovery tool support. That this can serve as an eye-opener for such integrated approaches. And of course, we would appreciate more partners to step in at one level or the other. Maybe someone in the audience knows where to step in. That would be highly appreciated. Then secondly, what I would like to highlight is the issue of international advocacy for green recovery in cities. I think with the COVID crisis, the current discussion, there is a good momentum for systemic thinking. We need to see the interlinkages of different sectors and synergies between the SDGs and different global agendas, including the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. I think this is no news for urban professionals, but international development actors, including BMZ with its notion of recover forward, are increasingly recognizing this need to integrate. But we face the risk that everything will fall behind, from after times of the high times of the crisis, and that we may recover backwards and fall back into old patterns of acting in sectoral silos, into conventional fossil fuel technologies and so on. So we have to integrate the recovery from COVID-19 with economic empowerment and equity, and urban systems that are resilient to external shocks and slow onset events such as climate change. And at the same time, we need to decarbonize our societies. We only have this one chance and we cannot afford to fall back. So we need the partnerships to drive this. And with the example from ReCAP21 and other initiatives, we can continue advocating for integrated approaches in our partnerships with the organizations involved here, which is obvious, but also win and convince other actors. Maybe most importantly, get national governments on board to enable city action towards a resilient recovery in multi-level dialogue approaches. And thirdly, very shortly, I would just like to echo Dana's remark of funding. Equipping municipalities with tools to achieve more financial resilience, as well as channeling more finance into such integrated approaches are needed.
Thank you so much, Felix. I think it's absolutely critical, everything you mentioned, and Dana as well. Maybe, Samia, if you could briefly reflect on the priorities from your perspective for ICLE, and maybe in the meantime, if there are, for our online participants, please feel free to ask questions. We still have a bit of time, and we'd love to hear from you. So type in your questions, and we're happy to try and field them as well. Samia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marake. I think I would echo everything that Dana and Felix have said. I think extremely important points, especially on the finance side and on the capacities of cities to be able to deal with such pandemics, to help them, especially from the planning perspective. So one, we have cross-sectoral approaches. The other is the actual devolution of power to local authorities. So how much is a local authority responsible for? What we have seen during the pandemic is local authorities had to struggle to find a administrative hook to be able to work with these local communities on several of these aspects. For example, health sits with the State Department, livelihood sits with the State Department, but the state governments and the provincial governments are not going to come into the city and work. So the city governments had to really struggle to find these linkages. And so the planning lies at the provincial level. The action has to happen at the state level. So this is something that I think is important to work with the provincial level and with the national level. The advocacy needs to happen there. We need to work together with them to find approaches that would empower the local authorities more. I think this is extremely important, and this has been a lesson I think all levels of government have learned, and we should not forget that. I think what Felix said is, not going back to our old ways. That is a very real danger, especially when we're seeing lower numbers and we are seeing behavior patterns just repeating from, what was pre-pandemic. That's a bit of a scare. But that said, and then enabling access to finance. So the finance is there. The need is there. There is a certain articulation. So compared to 5 years ago, the articulation of projects and the needs is much better today. But cities are not empowered to access this finance without provincial and national level approvals. It also has to do with credit rating, etc. But improving the financial performance of cities, I think, is critical, while we are also working towards access to finance. Access to finance is not getting easier if we are not helping the cities improve their financial health. Ultimately, that is what it is boiling down to. So I think these are a few topics that we will have to look at. And I think capacity building all around is something that we will, of course, work with the cities. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Soumya. Yeah, I like the term financial health. This is also something we've seen, that creditworthiness is a challenge with many of the local governments who actually desperately need to access finance, but they cannot because they are not creditworthy, or the national governments would not stand in for them, giving guarantees for the large local implementation projects. So there's a lot to be done. And I'm actually quite happy. We have seen new partnerships being launched at the COP, also for new labels, and there is movement and an understanding, I believe, in the financing institution space that we have this challenge, and there are hopefully innovative financial solutions coming soon to address that particular issue. One of the things that sort of was a thread through what all of you were saying was what I interpret as good governance, multi-level governance, there's regular conversations between different levels of government in order to better discuss coordinated planning. I know some of you also touched on the roles, responsibilities, and the mandates of local governments, whether do they have the mandate to deal with something or not. As we see currently, many local governments in most countries do not formally have the mandate to tackle climate change. It is sort of hidden either as an indirect mandate, which they can bring that hook in, Dana, I think, as you mentioned, and also to try and understand, in my view, there's a need for reviewing the roles, mandates, and responsibilities of all levels of government to see how we can optimize the system all over. There's some questions coming in. Let me just quickly check from our online audience. When can we expect these tools to come out? Excellent question, sir or madam. We are working on this now, fast and furious, to bring out at the end of the project. So let's say early December, we will be launching sort of a compendium, including wonderful case studies from the cities where we've been working in, a summary of the different tools. So, and these are all typically available online. And I believe GIZ, ICLEI, and Resilient Cities Network will all publish the same compendium online, so that you would be able to access it through multiple websites as well. So yeah, watch that space. It's going to be interesting. And indeed, this is the start of the endeavor. I think we need to zoom in and get that loop in, to get the lessons learned, and to collect it also from all of you who are working on this topic. So please, if you have examples to share from your own experiences around the globe, please do not hesitate to send them to us at ICLEI, at the carbon@iclei.org email. We'd be happy to pass this on also to our colleagues in the ReCAP project to see how we can also cross-link to each other's work. I think there is a healthy diversity of what is moving out there. And indeed, we should not reinvent the wheel. We should try and optimize the wheel as far as we can, and also connect to what you're doing. A question coming in: will you continue working together in this partner constellation after the ReCAP21 project concludes on any other projects? Now, I personally love that question. I cannot answer it. Maybe we could nudge our BMZ colleague gently to put that forward, but we will not put him on the spot at the moment. But indeed, we hope that the donors will touch on this and bring the green recovery and climate action together in all the work they're doing. As Dana mentioned, we need to bring these perspectives in to really better work and ease the way we work with local and regional governments, as well as national governments, to help them not only achieve their NDC targets, but also their green recovery targets as well. I'm opening the floor to our speakers. Maybe also Ruben and Nazmul, you're welcome to join us. Are there anything else you would like to make as a final remark before we close? Ruben, do you have anything for us?
Yes, as you just mentioned, me and my role in this, why don't I take a few moments to actually touch upon this question on who should, in what constellation, continue the work to be started with ReCAP21. I think, first of all, obviously, it's good to see that this cooperation was as successful as we had hoped for. You know, I think we've always been promoting multi-stakeholder approaches, bringing together different actors to combine their unique strengths that they bring to the table their unique experiences, their network of partners, partner cities, partner organizations, and so on and so forth, and try to combine this in a manner that is, in the end, bigger than the sum of its parts, right? So we take all the good stuff that you and the other organizations are doing, and see what makes those organizations and those working together unique to tackle this specific situation. And in this case of ReCAP21, we used, through our GIZ project, we approached you, and we approached resilient cities, and we approached the Cities Alliance, because we thought, okay, they all have something that really will hopefully contribute to making this a success. And as I said in the beginning, it's good to see that this actually worked. So looking to the future, I think this generally is a lesson, a positive lesson learned, that this kind of collaborative approaches work. They work even in a very short time span. And therefore, I encourage certainly my ministry, but also all of you to use this to work together in the future with or without our involvement. We will certainly pick up on that. And whenever approaching a challenge, to look at who is there with specific knowledge, with specific skills that can help me or you in this case to better tackle the situation. I think if we continue in this collaborative spirit, we can be very impactful, even with fairly limited resources, which obviously is a problem for all of us. It's a problem for the cities. It's a problem for the international organizations. It's a problem for us as a ministry. There's always too much to do and too little money to finance it. But I think this kind of collaboration, this kind of working together as different partners, really helps us to multiply our impact. So I very much hope that you are as encouraged as I am to keep this kind of approaches up. And I'm always thinking the exact constellation is not that important, right? I mean, you could bring on different partners, shift the focus a little. What is important is to have this network, to know each other, and to know who to pick up once you come to the conclusion, okay, this is the right organization to work with on this specific issue. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you very much, Ruben. Maybe Nazmo, a final concluding word from your side before we wrap up. How can we, from Eclipse's perspective, take this forward?
Thank you, Marijke. Yes, I would like to have a different hat on me at this moment, because I came from a country, Bangladesh, and I have quite a long experience living in city of Dhaka and also in Russia. So I know the situation and how we should look forward, actually. And yes, from a city network like Eclipse, what is, and also when we are talking about the very valuable space of partnership, we also need to include the city and local government as one of our most important partners, not only to pass knowledge from one-sided, from donor and organizations to the city level, but we also need to hear from them and need to make a good understanding what actually is working at their level, what is not. Cities like Bangladesh, cities like Rwanda, they are champion cities. They have been dealing with all these uncertainties, all this natural disaster for hundreds of years, and they have quite a long history of resilience. We need to recognize them. We need to hear from them how they are making themselves sustainable, although this is not quite recognized. And we also need to extend the peer exchange from cities to cities. It can be from south to north. Even northern cities can have many things to learn from the global southern cities, and making this city learning space a much more inclusive and collaborative space where everybody can learn from each other and can be champion of resilience and green development. And as a organization which I represent, Eclipse is one of the biggest city networks. We can definitely put a bigger role in that. We encouraging our member cities to take part, bring forward their lessons and their experience, and we can help them to spread through the other networks, through the other members, other cities, so that we can enable that mutual learning space with much more impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nazmal. Points well made. I think indeed that's what I mentioned also with the feedback loop. We need to get information flowing back and forth between us all, between partnerships, but also between the local and national governments, as well as listening to what our local governments have already done and learned to help scale up in other cities, towns, and regions around the world. There is tremendous potential here. Felix has kindly put the link in the chat function for showing the knowledge and tools gained through the project will be published from GIZ on an easily acceptable link there. So we would be happy to, if you would use that and also make any feedback that, as we've said before, if you're working in this space and you have something to contribute, please feel free to share with us as well. And we'd love to take this into a further discussion in 2022, because the pandemic is not yet over and we can certainly learn from each other as well. I'm losing my voice because I've done too much moderation. So I will happily end the session here, thanking everybody very, very much. It's been wonderful to hear from all of you. And for those of you at the COP, wishing you to stay safe and have a successful COP and safe journey back home. And for those of you who joined virtually, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to your feedback and connecting to you in the future. Thank you all. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.